Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon here at South Carolina Legal Services, we are leveling up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I'm Susan Ingalls. I'm Senior Staff Attorney and Consumer Protection Law Unit Head here at South Carolina Legal Services in our Greenville office. And I'm joined, as always, by our producer, Kenneth Elliott, who you can't see, but he's making sure everything's working there in the background. So thanks for that, Kenneth. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Military Lending Act because it is Military Consumer Month in the United States. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, I do want to remind our viewers that this is not legal advice in any way. This is just general information for the public. But if you do need a lawyer or you want to see if you have been subjected to a violation of the Military Lending Act or the Service Members Civil Relief Act, you can apply for our services, and I'm going to show you that information in just a moment and also at the end of the presentation. So welcome aboard. Quickly, before we get started, I do want to give you this QR code. We always, every week, we want to hear from you about a particular topic that you might want to have us do a presentation on. So scan that QR code. I'll give you a second to do that. And you can also, when you scan that code, you can give us a topic idea. But you can also sign up for our newsletter, and you can even donate to our nonprofit law firm. So hopefully some of you will do that. Okay, you can see over here on our Connect card on your left, all the ways to get in touch with us. Most importantly is our website and our toll-free telephone number so that you can apply for our services. But also we're on all the social media, and we put out a lot of content there that can be really helpful. So I encourage everyone to take a moment now to make a note to yourself to join us on all those platforms, and certainly on our YouTube channel, where all of our Level Up Law episodes are posted. Kenneth records them every week and posts them to our YouTube channel on the Level Up Law playlist on that channel. So definitely go there and subscribe to that channel so you can get an alert every time we post a new video, because we post videos all the time there on our YouTube channel, and they're not always just episodes of Level Up Law. So check it out. There may be something there that can be helpful to you. All right, well, let's get started with the highlights of the Military Lending Act. We'll be talking about what it covers, what it doesn't cover, and how the Service Members Relief Act is different from the Military Lending Act. And just to preface that, you know, it's tough on our military service members, and the government gets that. We as Americans get that. And back in 2006, the Military Lending Act was put into action. And what had happened was the Department of Defense had put out a report about how many service members were suffering financially, and actually that report said that 17% of active duty service members were taking out payday loans, which is the worst because there's such those and other types of loans as well have really high interest rates, and it can really suck that money out of your paycheck no matter what kind of job you have, whether it's military or otherwise. And so there was a real concern about that, and the Military Lending Act happened. And actually there was just this month, I believe, some updating to some of the ways that creditors find out if you are active duty or not. And then also in 2015, there was a amendment to the act. So from 2006 and then 2015, there was an update, and some more types of loans were began to be covered. So what is the Military Lending Act? So it is a federal law. And the biggest point I think that we want to take away from this is that it caps interest rates for service members who are on active duty at 36%. And that's, it's high, of course. It's not the kind of interest rate you want to get, but it's not up there in that predatory lending range of 200 and 300%. So having that cap for the service members is really good. Part of the idea of having the Military Lending Act when they started it was to protect service members who were maybe needing an influx of cash to keep their family going or something like that. So they could be really susceptible and vulnerable to predatory lending. So it applies to active duty, but it includes National Guard and Reserve if you're on active duty in those branches. And it also covers spouses and sometimes certain dependents. So again, the main thing is that interest rate being charged. So let's talk a little bit about the other things that are covered. Obviously that 36% cap is great. And what you want to keep in mind is that it's not just for the interest rate that you're paying on the loan. It includes other forms of what we call, or what kind of qualifies as interest, such as finance charges, or if you're getting credit insurance, which obviously is optional. Always remember credit insurance is optional. But if you're getting that, that can be included in that 36% overall. Other kind of credit related products, fees that may be added to a loan, many of those can qualify as being within that 36% cap. So it's really important to know about that. Also, a really good one is that the creditor cannot require you to submit to mandatory arbitration or really give up any other rights that you have under the Service Member Civil Relief Act. So that's important. There's many contracts have these provisions in them where you're waiving some kind of right, and that's why it's always so important to read those terms and conditions, right? So keep that in mind. Another really good one is no mandatory allotments are allowed. So a lender can't tell you, well, we have this special deal for military, and but you have to qualify for the payments will have to come from your allotment, and otherwise, you can't do it. Well, that's a mandatory allotment for a loan, and that would violate this act. So that's really important provision to know about. And then also no prepayment penalties. So if the service member is able to pay off a loan early for some reason, there can't be a penalty for that. And that's something that we always look for in the lending world when we're looking at loans, is to make sure that that prepayment penalty is not going to happen. Talk about some specifics of what is covered under the Military Lending Act. Okay, and like I said, they did update it in 2015 as far as what was covered, but you can see here, payday loans, deposit advance products, those are loans that are made because you have a regular, like an automatic deposit that comes into your account with your income every month. And those types of products, you can be eligible for because you have that regular amount, and they know that they can be paid for that loan on your next paycheck. Tax refund anticipation loans, and those are usually done by the big companies that do tax returns for people, and sometimes called a TRAL. It's TRAL for tax refund anticipation loan, and that's a way where people can they know they're going to be getting a tax refund, and they want to go ahead and get it now. And these companies will offer it, and probably often encourage it, I would imagine. It does have a high interest rate quite often. And, you're anxious to get that money, but, these days your tax refunds come pretty quickly. And so I always encourage people to really think twice before going ahead and getting that loan for your refund, which then your refund will go to the tax company, tax preparer. Also, title loans for cars is another one that's covered. And those can tend to be, those and payday loans can also be really high interest rates. So being able to cap that at 36% is really good. And lots of times people will have overdraft options on their bank account. If it's an overdraft, like a line of credit that you have on your bank account, that is covered, but just the, everyday sort of, you with overdraft on when that check came through and now you're negative $56 in your bank account or something, that kind of overdraft is not covered at this time. But also installment loans, and there's a distinction there because the loans that you are getting to actually buy something with, like buying a car or buying a refrigerator or television or something like that, and you're signing a loan for the money to purchase the item, that is not going to be covered because it's a loan that's secured by the item that is being purchased. But sometimes there are loans where you're just, this happens a lot with finance companies. You borrow money, you get a loan from a finance company, but they want you to provide collateral, which is often and most usually in the form of personal property, like appliances, furniture, electronics, television, computers, and things like that. Those are covered because although it's like a secured interest, you're not getting the loan to buy the item with. So that's a big distinction. And the Act also covers certain student loans as well. That's a whole other thing that we won't get into the details of today. But as with everything, when you run into issues with this, and if you're a veteran and you think you may have been in a situation where this act was violated, you can always contact South Carolina Legal Services and see if we can help you out with that and determine if in fact the act was violated. One other thing is credit cards, of course, are covered. And interestingly, with that 2015 amendment, the credit card companies didn't have to comply with those new rules until October of 2017. Not sure what the reason was for that, but anyway, right now it's covered. So what's not covered? And this just goes back to the whole idea of security interest, where you're getting a loan to buy an item, and that's really not covered. Things like a mortgage on your house or any other kind of a loan where you're giving your home as collateral, even if it's refinancing a previous mortgage, if it's a HELOC, home equity line of credit, or even a reverse mortgage, those are not covered because those are secured loans. If you get a loan to buy a car, that's not covered. If the car is the collateral for the loan, and it normally is. And then if you are buying the personal property with the loan, not just giving property that you have as security for a new loan, but if you're buying something, like maybe you're buying a refrigerator, or maybe you're financing the purchase of a big computer system or something like that, that would not be covered under the Act. So you don't get that 36% cap and some of those things. So here is a QR code that you can scan, and it goes to a really neat graphic that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB of the federal government, has a great graphic and a flow chart about the Military Lending Act and what's covered and what's not, and how you can figure out if what you're looking at is or is not covered. And they also have a great checklist for violations, the possible types of violations. So I encourage you to go ahead and scan that QR code, and you can go to the CFPB's website and get some more details about all that. Okay, now there's also the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the SCRA, and that is a different act, and what it protects is, or protections that it offers cover existing debts. So when you are deployed or when you go into active duty, debts that you already have are covered by the Service Members Civil Relief Act. And it caps interest rate charges at 6%. So it applies to similar things that you might think about: student loans, credit cards, car loans, and so forth. So those are, if you have, for example, an item with a really high interest rate and you go into active duty, that should be reduced to the 6% while you're on active duty. And so it's a really great protection that act offers. But you've got to let your creditors know that you're going on active duty so that they will know to reduce that. And that's something that you can do for yourself and save yourself a lot of money. There's some other protections. One of the good ones is that you're protected from a default judgment if you get sued in a lawsuit over some sort of a credit, service, or product. A default judgment is when a creditor sues you, or really in any lawsuit, a default judgment means that you didn't answer the lawsuit. So typically you have a certain number of days, 20 or 30 days, depending on what court you're in, to answer the complaint. And you get a notice when you're served with that of how much time you have to respond. Unfortunately, the problem is when you're on active duty, you are not there to get those papers. And usually the rules about serving papers include that someone at your home can be served. But that might be a family member. There's nothing they can do. They can't answer the complaint for you. And so the SCRA protects you from them getting a judgment because you didn't know about the lawsuit and you didn't answer it. So that's a really important protection. And we will talk a little bit about how creditors can check about your active duty status. So another protection is foreclosure of mortgages. They have to get a court order to foreclose on you. Now, in a state like South Carolina, which is where we are a judicial foreclosure state, so there has to be a lawsuit either way. So that's important to know. And actually, it also can extend for a year after you come off of active duty. So really important protection there. Also, they can't just go repossess your car. If you haven't paid on your car payment, they can't just go repossess it. They have to go to court and get a court order. And the reason for having to get these court orders is to protect you as a service member, because you're not here to protect yourself. And hopefully, if there has to be an action brought in court, then you're going to have a judge that's going to protect what your rights are and make sure to what degree the relief that the creditor is seeking is really available to them. Now, sometimes you may be renting and you get deployed as a service member. You can terminate your lease under the Military Lending Act, which is really helpful. Sometimes, depending on the situation and the type of loan that you have and when you got it, sometimes an auto loan can also be stopped, because that's like a lease too. It's of a car instead of a home. And then you can't be evicted from your main residence without a court order. Again, the court system is going to make sure that your rights are protected. So the requirement of a court order is really important. And even if they do get a court order for that, you still can have that delayed by 90 days. So that's a helpful protection as well. And for the Service Members Civil Relief Act, there's another QR code, which I encourage you to scan if you are in the military and if you are maybe subjected to deployment or other active duty. It can be so unpredictable, I know, and so it's important to have all this information at hand. So more details with a great checklist and information from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau there as well. And they have a lot more detail than what we're able to do in a presentation like this. So you might have a specific question. Sometimes those can be answered on these websites. They usually will have a section of frequently asked questions that you can go and find out. But keep in mind, if you think that act is being violated as to you, you can always check South Carolina Legal Services and see if we can help you figure that out and do something about it. There's also the Military Lending Act website. I've got a QR code for that here, but I'm also giving you just what the URL is there. So that's a great website and has a whole lot of information about the Military Lending Act. One of the things that can be done through that website is for a creditor to get the information about your active duty status. So they can go to that website and find out if you're on active duty or not. So what a lot of creditors do, in fact, I would say most creditors do when they're filing a lawsuit, they have an affidavit that says that they have checked your, to see if you are on any kind of active military duty. And, obviously if they filed the lawsuit, they've determined that whoever they're suing is not active duty military. And so they're able to go ahead with the lawsuit. And doing that really protects those creditors from violating the act with that lawsuit. So keep that in mind, scan this QR code and get some more really great information on the Military Lending Act website. Really helpful stuff. Now, there's also a website called military.consumer.gov. And that's a terrific place to find information as well. And with it being Military Consumer Month in July, you can find really a lot of specific information about the consumer rights of military service members and their families. So, there's all kinds of other rights that you have, but when it comes to the consumer rights, you can visit this website and really get a lot of good information about your consumer rights, and I encourage you to do that. Of course, a lot of things and a lot of information that's there is the same information that non-military individuals have as well, but with the military service members, sometimes there can be some specifics that the rest of us don't have because we're not being subjected to deployment, being out of the country, those kind of unexpected things that can happen when you're in the military, the National Guard, or the reserves. That website is sponsored by the Department of Defense, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. All three of those federal agencies are really great resources for military service members. The Federal Trade Commission, right now, ftc.gov is, and CFPB as well, putting out a lot of information because of it being Military Consumer Month. So a lot of warnings, a lot of little bits of information that can be really helpful to you. So I encourage you to go there and definitely follow them on social media. And of course, just a reminder to follow South Carolina Legal Services on social media. We have a lot of good information, not only about consumer law, but all of the other areas of law that we practice in, which is anything from, in addition to consumer law, housing, education, public benefits, family law. So all kinds of great help you can get at South Carolina Legal Services. So if you're suffering some sort of a legal issue, I encourage you to give us a call, or you can apply by phone, but you can also apply online, and that's 24/7. You can do that after work or whatever. Our intake line on the telephone is only open Monday through Thursday from 9 to 6. And so if you can't get through during those hours, you can always opt for the online variant of that. Also, again, just giving you that QR code to sign up for our newsletter and all of that good stuff. We want to hear from you. So give us a call. You can do it by just scanning that QR code and sending in, filling out that form and sending in the information. So that's all I have for today on Military Lending Act and the Service Member Civil Relief Act. It's a very brief overview, mainly intended to let you know the basics of what those laws cover. There's a lot more detail, of course, and so that's why it's always good to consult with an attorney. And of course, the military has attorneys that can be helpful to you, but also if your family's back home, or you don't know if something's covered, you can always check out these great information sheets that those government agencies have for you, and obviously check with your financial advisors that they have available to you in the military. So that's it for me on the Military Lending Act and the Service Members Civil Relief Act. I appreciate you joining us today. And as always, like, follow, subscribe. We need your help getting this information out. Kenneth will post the recording of this episode to our YouTube channel. So I hope that anyone who didn't get to see it live can go there and look at the recording. And if you know it's going to be potentially helpful to someone you know, please share it, as well as giving it a like or a comment. We always welcome those and appreciate it when you do that. And next week on Level Up Law, we will have our Education Law Unit Head, Elliot Tate, joining us, and Elliot will be talking about how to get an IEP, an Individual Education Plan. And that's going to be really helpful. We've got a lot of resources that are very detailed about IEPs and 504s when it comes to your education or your child's education. But Elliot is going to just be giving us the basics, how to get started, how to get an IEP to begin with. And so that should be really helpful. We've got some other great episodes coming up. So just check out that calendar on our website at www.sclegal.org. And all of the episodes, registration information is right there on all the Tuesdays for the month. So be sure to join us, and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here to get this helpful information. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.